Hi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video you have episode 15 of Recent Reads. I am coming to you not midway through the week, but maybe midway through what I plan to read. I have a little bit more time this week now that I've gotten to Friday because we have a long weekend for the Easter holiday. It used to be that my school district would always put spring break by Easter, but they're, I guess, standardizing things now, and I think they may plan to always put spring break at the end of third quarter. I don't know, it makes things a little easier, but because we live in the South, they're obviously going to give people time off around Easter, and they're able to do that because we're an e-learning school in South Carolina. But logistics aside, I have time to read today, and I plan to read a lot, hopefully, because just like in March, where I read 32 books, the goal of being 31 books in the day because that's the number of days in the month, I want to read 30 books in April, minimum. I am behind that goal. I'm about 2 books behind that goal at this time because I don't count today in those numbers because today's barely started. And I don't remember where I was going with this at the start of that. So I'm gonna try to pick up. But anyway, I have that goal. Oh, I'm planning to use this time to get caught up on that. And so I have 2 books that I've read during the week, but it was just a really busy week. And so I didn't get as much read as I thought I would. Since I'm talking about it, let me go ahead and mention that one. And that is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the next series that I definitely plan to finish, especially because winter will get me like 60 points for my team for Realmathon. Again, and this Recent Reads, it's gonna be themed for Realmathon. I'm not going to state the number of points because by the time I come back to film this, I've already entered this and earned those points. I don't remember the number. But because this is my realm's genre, sci-fi, I earned points for that. I was able to get a lot of points, the higher points for the 5 prompts to use, and this is a book that is about 460-ish pages. Winter, the last book in the series, is about 800 pages. Thankfully, I'll be reading that as audiobook, and so I get even more points for that. But Scarlet is book 2 in the Lunar Chronicles series, and I read Cinder a while ago, but I remember enough of it that I didn't need to go back and do a refresher on it. In each book, Marissa Meyer retells a different fairy tale, but is still connecting the stories. These are much more connected than, say, the Graceling Realm series are, especially the first 3 books of the Graceling Realm, because Cinder is still a point of view character in this book. But the title character is Scarlet, and of course this book is retelling Little Red Riding Hood. And so Scarlet lives with her grandmother. Her mother has died, I believe, and her father is a no-good and can't depend on him. So she lives with her grandmother, and they farm. Her grandmother used to be in the army, but about 15, 16 years ago, she retired and now works on this farm. Scarlet is a little bit older than Cinder. She's 18, I believe. But at the time that this opens, her grandmother has gone missing. And she's trying to find her grandmother and ends up connecting with this guy who seems unusual. And he goes by the moniker of Wolf. So, I mean, Little Red Riding Hood. And so, if you know the fairy tale of Little Red Riding Hood, you are constantly waiting for, okay, when is Wolf going to betray Scarlet? Because, you know, Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf ate the grandmother. And the connection is really interesting. I'm not going to get into that. Cinder is still involved in this. And I would have preferred more time spent with Scarlet's story because that meant that the relationship between Scarlet and Wolf was very rushed. And it was believable-ish, but it started to threaten the suspension of disbelief for their relationship just because we didn't get as much time with their characters as we needed to make that fully believable. Even though I didn't think that we necessarily needed Cinder's perspective, I mean we do because she's a very pivotal character in this series, I did really enjoy the relationships that she develops with this new character of Thorn. And I think, in fact, we don't actually get Cinder's perspective until we've had a chapter from Thorn, who you're going, who is this? He seems like a dandy. He seems like a Captain Jack, if you know Doctor Who, which I appreciate, although Captain Jack is a little bit more hardcore than Thorn is in this. But I did appreciate at the end how it all comes together. But there was a point in the section that I read last night, in the last 100 pages, that literally made me gag. And it comes with a confrontation, a final-ish confrontation that Wolf has with one of the other bad guys, and I'm not going to say any more than that. One of the bad guys, it's close to him. And it's just kind of disgusting what's described there. And I literally am reading this and I'm like, what, you did what? Okay. So Marissa Meyer goes there. But the connections are so strong and so real that whenever I get viscerally involved in that, I will say, yes, I definitely appreciated this reading experience and will keep reading. I am much more engaged with this series than with the Graceling Realm series. I haven't put it through Compile yet. I can't imagine that it's going to get a 4.5 star. It might just squeak out a 4.5 star, but I have a feeling this is going to be a solid 4 stars. Then we come to the book that I read as an audiobook, and that is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. So this book had a few things that didn't work for me. Well, one thing mainly that didn't work for me, and that's the fact that I have already listened to a lot of different podcasts and investigative journalism about the Golden State Killer. There was a whole podcast series I think that I listened to. So most of the information discussed in here, I already knew, and it wasn't new to me, obviously. And so that little nugget, that intrigue to keep you reading, I didn't have that because I'd already learned that. I'd already had that intrigue in the form of a podcast. Secondly, and this is not a fault of the book, because of the time when the book was published. This book was published in, I think, 2018 or 2017. Yes, it was published in 2018. But I think it was early on in 2018 because in 2018, they find the Golden State Killer. This book leaves off, obviously, by the time it was published, all of the stuff that they've written for it was like 2017 or before that. And so it was a little bit anticlimactic and a little bit like, I don't know. It was nice knowing that they've found the guy and he's not going to be doing this anymore and he's going to be held accountable for his horrific crimes. But there was just, and that's definitely not the book's fault because they could not have predicted that they were going to find him and arrest him the year that this book was published. I mean, that definitely helped for sales of this book. The other thing that doesn't work for me, that is a fault of the book and that a lot of people have talked about, is the fact that Michelle McNamara died prior to finishing this book. And so there were pieces that she hadn't put together yet and had to be pieced together by other people. Some of the sections throughout where they would mention that it was taken from another piece that she wrote or something else, those for me worked because those were still her words and her way of writing, which was really strong and really powerful. But there was a chapter at the end where all they had were her notes and they weren't, like, they had to actually write the text. And it was an interesting concept, and I think it was on geoprofiling, but it was so dry. It was like listing facts through there. And compared with the power of McNamara's prose, I did not like it, but I was expecting it because other people have talked about it. And obviously that's not necessarily something that they could have done anything about. They couldn't have done anything about it because of her tragic death. So this is a good book. It's well written. It's really strong. It just didn't engage with me. And at any point along the reading, I could have set it down and been like, I'm okay. I don't have to pick it back up, but I'm a completionist. So I did finish it, especially because I was listening to it as an audiobook. So it's good, but I don't know that I'm going to hold on to it. I have to put it through Compile, see what I've rated it. Actually, you know what? I have put it through Compile. It was a 3.5 stars. So I think it'll stay on the shelves for a little while, but in a future unhaul, I might get rid of it. The only thing that I find ironic is the next book that I picked up that was on my list that I didn't realize when I purchased the book is I picked up Unmasked. My Life in Solving Cold Cases or something. I forget the subtitle, but it's by Paul Holes. And he is an investigator that Michelle McNamara worked with while she was researching this. And I had just read a section, obviously towards the end, that was transcripts that she had with him. Like, oh, okay, well, that's a neat connection to just pick up and carry on with a related character in this story. But you'll get my thoughts on that hopefully later today because I plan to go finish it right now. Okay, so I'm set up here to do an unboxing of a couple boxes, one of which I'm really excited about, long anticipated, but I decided to go ahead and do the next two books that I have read. I'm gonna start with the DNF first, and that is a book that I read on my Kindle. It's one of the ARCs that I had. It's called The Memory Jumper, and I would have DNF'd it a lot sooner, except for the fact that I wanted to make sure to count it for Readathon. Sorry, I adjusted the angle of the camera. So I wanted to make sure to count it for Readathon, so I had to read more than 50%. At the first point that I paused, I was like, I'm really not seeing much hope here, but I'm only about 11% in. I'll give it a little bit more time. It didn't really get better. It wasn't terrible, awful, everything's terrible about it, but it just wasn't good either. I didn't realize until looking at some reviews that it was supposed to be a Rapunzel retelling. Now that I know that, I can think back on what went on in it and go, oh, okay, that's what's going on. So here's the setup. In The Memory Jumper, I would not have gotten the idea for the book from this cover. In The Memory Jumper, it's set in a sort of post-apocalyptic future. Something happened that completely changed the world. I'm not really clear on what happened, but there are these people called memory jumpers who can actually go into people's heads and change their memories, take away memories, etc. And the main character, the Rapunzel character, is a memory jumper. But something happened 50 years before where the ruler of this area wiped out all of the memory jumpers, blaming them for something terrible that happened. The Rapunzel character, whose name I forget, is kept in an underground bunker and being raised by the person who was her babysitter when this whole thing happened. So it wasn't 50 years ago. It was, I don't know, like 15 or so. And her parents were killed. And so her babysitter is taking care of her, but is extremely manipulative. And I'll be right back. I have to change the battery. And additionally, so basically her mom character, the babysitter, uses her talents as a memory jumper to make money. So she's being exploited. And she also works in like this criminal underground with these twins who have premonitions. It's almost like seeing paths in the future. So you'd think it's fantasy, but it's sci-fi. It's set in the future. It's supposed to be after this massive apocalyptic stuff. You've got teleporters, you've got sci-fi stuff, but you've also got somehow the world that, the part of the land that used to be America is now a kingdom with a dictatorial monarch that lives in a castle. And I'm going, are we sci-fi? Are we fantasy? Are we historical? What is going on here? All the pieces weren't connecting. And at one point, her mom takes her out, and that's the first time she's ever been out in the world, outside of the underground area. There's a fair, like a street fair, a medieval type fair, and they have this, they're supposedly called like a crowning festival or something, and it's supposed to be this grand tradition of whenever the prince is choosing his bride. The last time that happened was like 20 some years ago. But the character that she finds and interacts with has memories from the last time. And he's like her age. He's 20. That's another thing. The character is supposed to be 20 and 19. They do not act like they're 20 and 19. They act like they're 14 and 12. There were just too many inconsistencies, and there was a lot of info dumping about the world and explaining things that went on. Very dumbed down. It didn't work for me. So unfortunately, I had to DNF that. The other book that I finished as audiobook, and that is Doing Justice by Preet Bharara. Disclaimer at the beginning. I started listening to this last night, or yesterday, but I finished it this morning, most of it this morning, while playing Hogwarts Legacy. Probably not the best idea. Yes, I was paying attention to it, I was listening to it, I was reading it, but not as fully immersed in it. I don't even blame the game for it because I started listening to Cress after I finished this, and I'm following along, really engaged. This just did not hold my attention. This is not a bad book, however. I thought that a lot of the different insights that Bharara had throughout the book were really strong, really impactful, but it just felt very surface level. And at points he would use you and he'd be talking to the reader, but sometimes the reader was a fellow lawyer, judge wannabe. Sometimes the reader was like someone like me, a civilian. I'm like, who do you think your audience is? So it was not together coherent as more of a memoir. It was more like different topics of doing justice, which I kind of knew going in because of the subtitle, A Prosecutor's Thoughts on Crime, Punishment, and the Rule of Law. I was also hoping to find out more about the thing that made him a household-ish name, and that was his firing by the former president. And so this is more of a topic-driven book. So here are some of the topics. We've got Things Are Not What They Seem, Gold Standard Investigators, the problem of confirmation bias, the principles of interrogation, snitches, and then it switches. So that was part one. Part one is inquiry, and then you get accusation, judgment, and punishment. And I think punishment was the section that captivated me the most, but ultimately, unfortunately, it just didn't hold my attention. I think this is going to end up a 3-star, but I'm going to be a little bit generous in my rating because I was a little distracted. Okay, so I'm back doing another update before filming another unboxing because I realized while working on my reading journal that I forgot about a book that I read via audiobook, and that is Unmasked: My Life Solving America's Cold Cases by Paul Holes. Now, I didn't mean for this to be like a sequel, a conclusion to the I'll Be Gone in the Dark Golden State Killer story, but it is, kind of. It's not written that way, but Paul Holes was one of the very influential investigators that Michelle McNamara worked with, and in one of the chapters, there's actually included a transcript of a time when Michelle McNamara went out and visited all of these places, and the person taking her to all these places was Paul Holes. And this book worked a lot better for me. I think it's because of the structure, and it's more chronological, it's more straightforward, and that just works better for my brain. And yes, are there details of the different cases that he worked on, Golden State Killer case, etc.? Yes, but it's interspersed with his life, the steps and the choices that he made along the way. And it was a really fascinating look into Paul's life, and it was kind of sad because time after time after time throughout this book, he talks about how his obsession with these different cases did damage to his various relationships. His relationship with his first wife, his relationship with his first 2 kids, his relationship with his second wife, who he's still married to. Each time he acknowledges all of that hurt, he acknowledges everything that he did wrong, and that he shouldn't be as obsessed as he is, and that he should be more involved in these relationships. And then the very end, he's retired, the Golden State Killer case is solved, a case that he picked up and became obsessed with after that is solved, and yet he finished it off going, as I got up from my desk, I saw this black binder, and it's a case that he's been obsessed with and held on to for years. So it's like, did you actually learn anything? And it just makes me really sad that he sees the problems but can't really get over them. And so this was short, but definitely worth the read. It's been a long time since I've used this angle. I'm here to wrap up this week's recent reads. The first full week of Realmathon. There were 2 days last week that were part of Realmathon and Magical Readathon, but I think I have finished some, so I'm gonna look that up real quick over here on my computer. All right, so first off, I have finished my alchemy class, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. That was Metal in the title. That was The Hunt for the Golden State Killer. There we go. And I did that with I'll Be Gone in the Dark. I don't know how I said that. And that, unfortunately, is the only class I finished for Aurelium. Okay, so moving on to Realmathon, I have finished, let's see, I have a document here on my computer. I have finished a couple more since then. I'm actually gonna go tally up those points and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back with the updated spreadsheet to tell me what I've earned for Realmathon thus far. The first 2 that I have on this spreadsheet are from last week, the first 2 books that I read in Realmathon. This week, and it does include the one DNF because I read 50%, more than 50%, I should say, and that it includes 6 books. And of those 6, 3 I used to increase points for my team, and 3 I used to decrease points for other teams. And of those, I did it all 3 of the realms there. I earned a total of, let's see, I earned a total of 150 points for my realm. And I took away a total of 97 points from other realms, 30 from Cyrus, 27 from Sanctum, and 40 points from Enya. Those are my Aurelium and Realmathon standings. I have one last book to talk about, and that is Cress, but unfortunately this is the one that came to me from Thrift Books without a dust jacket, so it was no good for me to hold it up here. And I listened to this as an audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. I think that the way that Marissa Meyer does her storytelling is really immersive. It really gets you into the world. And this is my other Rapunzel retelling that I read this week. And just like last month, where I accidentally read 2 Anne of Green Gables retellings, the second one I enjoyed more than the first. But with Cress, the whole book is multi-POV. A large portion of it is centered on Cress, who is the Rapunzel in this retelling. She's been kept as a shell, a lunar without any powers, but she's been kept on this satellite, never worn shoes, never really seen anybody except for the thaumaturge, the second in command to the Lunar Queen, who comes and basically exploits her to get what they want done. But she's an amazing hacker, and she has found Cinder, and through that she's found Thorn and developed this completely unrealistic picture of Thorn and infatuation and crush on him. And it's just so fun to see their interactions from what happens at the beginning, and the whole crew gets split up and separated, and of course Cress and Thorn end up together. And the way that Thorn handles her cheeky little infatuation with him, but the way that the relationship developed, I think it was developed more realistically in this book than Scarlet and Wolf in the previous book, even though I think there was less time spent, or maybe about the same, in this book on Cress and Thorn as Scarlet and Wolf in the previous book. But I just thought it was really neat how they portrayed those together. And I think it really comes from the portrayal of the male character in these partnerships. Wolf was just automatically like head over heels for Scarlet, and like he'd do anything for her. And Thorn is like, yeah, I'm gonna help her. I'm this ne'er-do-well, but I need to depend on her for circumstances that happened in the story and not going to give away. And through that, you see the gradual development of attraction. So I did really appreciate that. I haven't put it through Cawpile yet, but this one is probably, even if it doesn't accumulate enough points to get up a change in a half star or anything. I think this one, Cress, is going to score more than Scarlet did. So there you have it. There are the, see, how many was that? That I actually read, not including the DNF. That is 5 books this week, 1 DNF, which is about 50%, and I am about 150 pages away from finishing Trust of the Emerald Sea. Did I get distracted by Hogwarts Legacy? Yes. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.